On this episode of Industry Relations, we're taking a look back on the 2022 highlights, and for the first time ever, we make next year's predictions. We're joined by special guest Joe Rand and Greg Fischer. Join us.
This is Industry Relations, a podcast that's at the intersection of real estate and technology from an insider's perspective, with Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson.
Hey everybody, I'm so happy to announce our newest sponsor, RentSpree. RentSpree is LA-based and is a provider of award-winning rental software that helps real estate agents, owners, and renters to simplify and automate the entire real estate rental process. From listing to lease, these guys have got it figured out. With nationwide coverage, RentSpree is an all-in-one platform is known for its easy and secure interface and suite of rental tools, including tenant screening, rent payments, marketing, and renter management. To date, RentSpree has partnered with over 250 of the most influential MLSs, associations, and brokerages, and they have over 1 million users throughout the U.S. That's great. In fact, they just announced a deal with the Miami Association of Realtors. This brings their agent count in Florida to over 120,000 agents, with over 600,000 total in the U.S. that is able to access RentSpree through their MLS or association. RentSpree is ranked 625th on the latest Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list in 2022. Also, check out the show notes for rentspree.com. They just issued a white paper that talks about the opportunities that agents can have by incorporating rentals in their business model. I've written a lot about this. I think it's a great strategy. So please visit rentspree.com to download that white paper. Thank you, Michael, and the entire RentSpree team for sponsoring Industry Relations. Rob and I really do appreciate it. So go visit rentspree.com today.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to a very, very special episode of Industry Relations with Rob and Greg. This is obviously the notorious Rob Hahn. How are you? And as always, with me is my co-host, the fabulous Greg Robertson.
What's up, Rob?
Hola. I'm assuming I have him. Your video's frozen, so I can't see the jazz hands, but I'm assuming you're doing them.
Damn, I was doing them.
Dude, did I get like the grumpy version of Greg Robertson for Christmas? The special Christmas broadcast?
Think so. Maybe a little coarse voice or something. My microphone.
What's that?
Complaining about my microphone.
No, it's good. It's just fine. I mean, just your video's frozen, but I know recording it anywhere. So, we've never done this before, Greg, but I think we want to try something different, something a little special, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, what we decided to do was do kind of a retrospective as well as predictions for next year. But, you know, Greg and I kind of do this on a regular basis since we just speculate for, like out of our ass. So we thought we'd invite like friends of ours, special guests who are actually pretty smart and not as ridiculous as we are. So let me bring them on now. First up is Mr. Joe Rand. Joe, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Rob? How are you, Greg? Good to see you both.
Doing good, man.
Good to see you. Thanks for agreeing to do this experiment with us. Joe is the Chief Creative Officer of Howard Hanna Rand Realty. Boy, that's a mouthful. As well as a best-selling author of, I think it's 2 books, right?
2 books,
Joe,
yeah.
You've got 2 books so far.
I appreciate the word best-selling. I think that's all in the eye of the beholder, but I appreciate the effort. I think Greg's book, who wrote an awesome book, I think has sold many more copies than I did. But mine are mostly.
I don't know about that.
You find mine all over. You find them in all sorts of, boxes, people moving,
airports.
Yeah. My favorite thing was when I found someone reselling it. That was a great moment when someone was selling it on Amazon.
That is awesome.
A used copy of my book, which is, it sells for $20. They were selling it for like $8. That was a great moment.
Oh, Jesus.
But thank you for having me.
That's a lot for a used book. All right. And speaking of airports, we have our friend Greg Fischer joining us from Denver Airport, I believe.
Yep, calling in from Denver. Happy holidays.
Talk about road warrior, Greg.
Damn, dude.
Number one place.
Yeah. Greg Fischer is the broker owner of Weston Maine Homes of Oregon, as well as, I believe you said you're like the head of technology for all of Weston Maine. Is that right?
It's pretty close, and Weston Maine is an awesome brokerage, and I'm stoked to be here. I saw both of you in person. I haven't seen you this year, Joe, but hopefully that'll change next year. So thanks for bringing me on.
And thanks for joining us for this prediction of Palooza. So, all right, gentlemen. I think where we want to start is like a retrospective. All right, because obviously a lot happened, and I might start with our special guest first. Let's start with Joe. Give us like, what do you think was the most important thing that happened in real estate in 2022?
That happened in 2022. I would say the biggest change that happened was the collapse of the public markets for basically real estate companies across the board. I mean, when you look at, and I guess this started in 2020, 2021, but you really did have everybody, Zillow, Redfin, the iBuyers, the traditional brokers, Compass and Douglas Elliman, that they all ended up at a fraction of where they'd started at the beginning of the year. And if you go back a little further, at an even smaller fraction of where they were in 2020 and 2021. And I think that, it's not just that for investors what that meant, but I think it really has changed the dynamic on the ground in the industry, because those were companies that were spending money to create disruptive influences and to do things, and they really can't do those things anymore. And so some of the pressures on some of the traditional incumbents some of those pressures have been lessened, but also just the fact that these business models that were getting a lot of funding are not going to have the same kind of funding going forward, and that's going to change, I think, the dynamic within the industry pretty profoundly this year.
Okay. So just to follow up on that, I guess I'm curious, like everyone else, jump in, but what business model not getting funded do you think is the most important?
Well, I mean, when you look at it, Compass's growth was fueled by their ability to be able to buy companies and buy agents. That was most of their growth came from acquisition, not from organic or recruiting or, natural growth. And they put a lot of pressure on Company Dollar. They put a lot of pressure on these urban companies. And that's, I think, going to moderate. They've said that they're going to be trying to cut costs, which means raising Company Dollar. And, you look at and say, how much money can, think about what Open Door spent on consumer marketing over the last few years. Are they going to be able to continue to do that, to keep their name up in front? I mean, they were inundating. If you lived in Phoenix over the last 4 or 5 years, you were seeing lots of advertising. I don't think you're going to be seeing that kind of marketing going forward. Now, those businesses are pivoting. They're changing their business models, and that's interesting. But I just think that what we had going on for the last 3 years, 5 years, in terms of these companies being able to kind of push the envelope and be able to drive, they were really driving the conversation, and they were driving changes in the industry and affecting other brokers, other companies, other tech companies. And I think that pressure is reduced a lot going forward to next year.
I think, really, if you think about it, Joe and Rob, it's a little bit, the collapse of the public markets, really the story behind all that and everything is really inflation, right? Because that's what caused a lot of this to happen. That affected the markets in a way where the interest rates started to go up. Right. And all the buyers left. Right. So that, I think, that was and the market softened. So, and that's, I guess exposed everybody in a sense, right, to what's going on. And the other part of that, I think, is that, we all know, because I think all of us here on this call have been in the industry for a while now, that this market is cyclical, but we haven't had that cycle, that downturn in a long ass time. Right. So when it hit hard. For sure, right? And as some people have talked about, the increase of interest rates has been historic as far as the slope of that. Meaning, what was the Open Door quote? Like, it hadn't happened that quickly in 40 years, right? So it's one of those types of situation which caused it all, right?
Right. All right, let's hear from the airport background noise guy, Mr. Fischer. What do you think is the most important event of this year in real estate?
Love that we're starting with the easiest questions first. I would go towards conversations around the compensation of your traditional real estate industry. Particularly, the major lawsuits that all of your listeners know about very intimately, and also seeing what sorts of changes come out. Northwest MLS is always first on the scene, I think, in this sort of area, and they've adjusted their contracts so that commission can be negotiated up front. It's at least a forcing function. For that, they had already been pioneers displaying, buyer agency commissions. And so I don't know that, I guess we'll get to what's going to happen in the future for that. But I'd say looking back, that's, for me, would be the big material change, because so much will happen from here because of it.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to pin you down, because that was a lot of different stuff. Like, is the most important thing Northwest MLS changing its forms, or is it like, what is the actual most important event?
That the public discourse, the administrative attention is on the cooperation and compensation aspect of United States real estate. Yeah.
Got it. All right, cool.
Yeah, I think in other words, shit just got real, forms, right? Good.
Wait, Joe, and then
No, I was just going to say that I thought it was funny the way you framed that, well, so it was the changing of the Northwest forms that was the biggest thing that happened this year. But to some extent, it's like the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, World War I. All these things come from this small little change, right? Like, who thought
I'm following him. I'm with you, Joe. I'm with you, Joe.
You're with me.
I'm with you.
Yeah, great.
I'm with you.
Robertson and I are on
Joe
sync.
Rand just equated Northwest MLS changing forms to the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. I'm just saying.
Yeah, World War I, the spark that caused World War I. Well, think about it, because it's the canary in the coal mine. I think he's right. I mean, I think that's when you say, there's two ways to look at a big change in 2022 is something that happened in 2022 that affected, like I think Greg said, or Robertson said, the interest rates, which to some extent precipitated the collapse of the public markets. And Greg Fish is saying, well, here you got this, the change has not yet wrought what it's going to, but it's a signifier of a change that's coming. That's the fact that Northwest was so in front of things in changing their forms is, to me, is something that's going to be really important next year, which we'll talk about as well. It'll be really important in 23.
Yeah, I think the way I would say it is that, what Greg Fisher's saying is that I think these lawsuits and everything has been around for a while, but shit got real this year with these things. MLSs are starting to act. They're starting to do new forms. They know, to grab a phrase from the past, that the lion's over the hill here, right? And it's coming. So I think, and that all is kind of coming in right now, right? So I definitely think that's a big factor for sure.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I agree. Like, the lawsuit is big thing. I guess for an event standpoint, I might have pointed to Sitzer/Burnett getting certified as a class action in Missouri to be like the more of a Archduke Ferdinand moment than Northwest MLS changing forms. But hey, I get it, as an overall. All right, Greg Robertson, what's your retrospective?
Yeah, I mean, I probably just peaked too soon there, but I mean, I think it was the rise in interest rates and how fast that happened. I think that just, as Joe said, it destroyed the public markets. As far as the industry's darling prop tech boys in iBuying, I mean, although Zillow exited that late 2021, I think November-ish. But Open Door just announcing they lost $1 billion last quarter. The other OfferPad looks like they might be delisted. And you look at the trouble that Redfin had with that. I mean, all those things just are a domino effect that really, I think in some cases they have a good business model, but yikes. When you have that steep of an increase in the interest rates, that's going to affect a lot of different things, right? So I would look at that as being, to me, the biggest story of this year that really made it, it's making everybody kind of go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to argue, right? I mean, interest rates, it utterly and completely screws housing, right? And there are a number of analysts out there who are talking about, look, what Jerome Powell's trying to do here is to kill the housing market, because the housing market is the engine of the economy. So by killing the housing market, it killed the engine of the economy, and therefore drive up unemployment, drive up, everything. and then it'll tame inflation because people are too broke to be able to afford anything. Like, all right,
But I mean, something had to be done. I mean, 20 offers, along with "I'll name my first child after you," and all this craziness that was going on. I mean, something had to break here, right? Whether it was that was some of the reasons why the government got involved, or just because that inflation. I mean, housing is a big part of that, right? So something had to happen for sure.
I don't know. I'm not enough of a macroeconomist to render opinions on that, because I don't know that that's really changed that much. Like, it's just that what we've done is we've completely driven out retail buyers, right, from the housing market, and I'm very, very concerned about that, right? Because institutional buyers are still around.
Greg can tell us, being probably the closest to the ground on this, if there's still a lot of multiple offers going on out there, right? I mean, as it was before.
Yeah. What's happening?
No, I mean, it's not happening, right? The first things to work backwards from are, these extra additional contingencies people used to put in their contracts.
Yeah.
Then you kind of get flat into pricing, and you're not seeing above ask. You're certainly not seeing multiple. And part of that, there's always buckets where this stuff, there's high, intent buyers looking for specific inventory, of course, but those are edge cases. I'd say overall, your listing sitting on the market for a while, and you might have one or two people interested in that home for the most part. So yeah, it's changed.
But is it because the sellers just haven't yet gotten realistic as to what the hell's going on in the market? Here's what I mean by that. Like, what the rise in interest rates have really done is it's made it impossible for individual, like actual family buyers, right? Like, now they can't afford shit. I think some of the stats we saw was like your monthly payments like nearly doubled, right? Okay, but if you're a hedge fund, you're not borrowing money anyway. What do you care? You're just waiting for the price to come down so you can swoop in and just buy for cash, right? I mean, that power hasn't gone anywhere. A lot of those funds have lost a bunch of money, granted, in the stock market. They didn't lose money in the housing market, right? So, I just have this feeling like the institutionals are just sitting back. They're just waiting. They're waiting for like the Airbnb investor types to get washed out. They're waiting for, the family buyers to just get like whatever, screwed. And they're just waiting for all the sellers to kind of come to terms with reality, and they'll step in and be like, cool, I'll offer you 30 cents on the dollar, like, take it or leave it. Like, what am I missing? I mean, am I crazy about that? Joe, I mean, what do you think? Am I crazy about that?
No, I think I think your point that the institutional investors aren't relying, at least not directly, on funding, that the interest rates don't affect them the way they affect the single individual buyer. And that so they might be freed up, they might have an advantage in this market. But it's also tough to say that they're also, I think, scared away by the prices having gone up as much, and I don't know if prices are going to come down enough to make them attractive buys if somebody's looking for bargains. If people are if some of these institutional investors, it needs to pencil out. And although rents have gone up, I think that that's also moderating a little bit about rent prices, and they may not be able to get the return they want, even without having to factor in the cost of money.
What do you think, Fish? I mean, are you seeing any? What are you seeing with investors, institutionals in your markets?
I mean, we don't track it that closely. It's not on the radar necessarily for us at the moment, volume wise, and it's a thing that's occurring. Certainly in Denver and some of our metro areas that we have operations in, but not to any degree that's more noticeable. Certainly less, right? With iBuyers not really having listing inventory, that's how we would normally come across them. But at this point, not really sure what they're up to locally.
Okay. All right. So just want to take all the time. I'll give you my big event of this year, because you guys stole all the good ones, honestly. You took all the good ones. I'm going to say mine is Open Door launching the third-party marketplace, the owner-owned, seller-owned exclusives program.
Yeah, exclusives.
To me, I think that's the big, the third-party exclusives thing. I think that is the big event of 2022. Because it's supposedly this has been their vision from the very start. They lose $1 billion. They're like, okay, we lost $1 billion. Guess what? We're launching a lightweight third-party marketplace. We're going to match buyer and seller using this exclusive program. Eric Wu resigns as CEO and goes over as president of Marketplace. I think a number of people saw that as some sort of punishment, like the board went to him and said, hey, man, you lost $1 billion. Time for you to get... No, it was not a demotion. This was a strategic move that really signals very clearly where they think the future is, what they find really important, and it's that marketplace. I think it's the most significant event of this year. Thoughts?
I think it's a significant event. I think that the idea that it was this kind of underlying idea that it was the plan all along, to me, strikes me as discordant. That, if your plan is to say, let's do thing A, lose billions of dollars, just billions upon billions of dollars, so we can pivot to what we really want to do, I would sort of say, well, why didn't they just do the thing that they really wanted to do at the beginning? Like, the thing they really wanted to do was doable 5 years ago when they launched iBuying. So I think to some extent this has been necessity is the mother of invention. Like, we need a new business model, so how about this? And so I think you're more sanguine than I am about like how promising this is, because my position would be, well, if this was such a great idea, why didn't they launch it in the last 5 years? Why did it take them losing $1 billion in a quarter to put it in place?
So in my defense, I guess I just have to.
You don't have to defend. I'm not attacking.
I just have to take Eric Wu at his word, right? So what was like new for me was apparently this was in their Series A deck, way back when they were a startup and they're going out for venture funding. And obviously, I'm not a venture capital. I don't know what their Series A deck looks like. Suppose in their Series A deck they said this is the original vision, but to get there, Eric Wu did go into it. We needed to generate sellers. We need to get sellers to the marketplace, which we did by essentially buying houses from them, get sellers to signify interest. Then we need to get buyers, and they spent, I think he said 1 year, 2 years doing the exclusives program, and the sort of the open secret that everyone knew, but it was still kind of not really talked about very much, which was the grip and the importance of institutional buyers to Open Doors business, right? And that came out in the Stratechery interview, that came out in the earnings call, that when they did exclusive, a lot of it was because they were going to the institutionals and saying, hey, here's a house, we're going to buy it, or we bought it. You have 14 days, you want to buy it, whatever. And they generate an enormous amount of traffic and interest out of that. I do agree. I think they moved too early. I think they were thinking they were going to launch this third-party thing maybe, 2-3 years from now. And I think the changing markets, I think the changing conditions said, okay, we got to do this now. We lost $1 billion. We got to launch this now. So I think they're pulling the trigger a little bit early, but I think I'm going to take them at their word. This is always the plan. They needed to generate seller interest, then buyer interest, and to create the marketplace.
I'm sure as they were like eating pizza and hitting the bong and they're writing on the whiteboard what their vision was, that somewhere on one of those thought bubbles was like this kind of concept, and sure, they'll throw it on the deck, right? But, all this stuff to me is, as Joe says, invention is a mother of necessity. A lot of stuff is iterative. When you start going there, you kind of look back and go, hey, maybe we can do this now. I don't know if they were just always driving towards that as the vision, but this came up when it came up. And it's not as if they're, and a lot of this to me is a little bit storytelling, right? So they lose $1 billion. They've got to Wall Street goes, what the fuck are you going to do here? What's the story now? And I think this Eric leaving, him being a product guy, putting him in charge of this, that was a story I think everybody could kind of swallow there. And that's what they did. Not, so that maybe it wasn't, I'm not saying they're lying about it, but there's some embellishment there, I think.
Yeah, you're a cynical man.
Oh, Jesus.
You're the tech startup guy. You should be the one that's like defending, Eric. And,
I'm with Robertson. I mean, the fact that it was slide 37 in a 50, slide pitch deck,
right.
And they're looking at it, I said, no, this was the plan all along. See, the plan all along was, my thought was that probably the first 36 slides probably described what they hoped would be a model that would have been profitable and would have worked, and that they then would have layered in this new marketplace idea, not, step one, implement, spend millions of dollars on marketing, spend two, lose $1 billion, step three, voila, we have the new marketplace. Like, I don't want to get too caught, because I think we're getting into the semantics of whether this was deliberate, as opposed to the substance of whether this is a valid, because this could be one of the big changes in 23. Not necessarily the big change in 2022, but the big change in 23 is if this thing goes off, what it could do, the havoc it could wreak in the indry. I think is an interesting question.
Thanks for that lead in, Joe. So let's actually pivot to what will happen in 2023, right? What do you guys see as the big predictions, right? And as you all know, I write these 7 predictions sure to be wrong or your money back. So in this episode, I'm going to try to make a prediction that I actually want to be correct. Right? So
let's start off with
Greg Fischer, then Joe, then Greg Robertson, and I'll close up.
I like it.
Prediction.
All right. I'll get real specific on this one then.
All right.
I'm going to say that MLSs or their venture associated organizations invest $250 million this upcoming year mostly into technology services. And I think that's a huge number. I think it's beyond anything they've ever been known for. And this market shift is a great opportunity for them to try a few things and learn. And so that's what I'm going with.
Okay, so MLSs are going to invest $250 million in 2023 into technology.
I assume he means collectively. Collectively, they're all going to be
collectively, right?
Yeah.
Do we
if you look at the past couple years, supposedly there was the purchase of Agent Inbox from AirMLS and some others. I don't know what that was disclosed. I think it was probably less than $1 million though. You looked at, but the bigger thing would be Remind, which has been rumored to be close to 50. Right. You look at these venture MLS fund from CRMLS and others. I think that's 10 million. Right. So that's, 250 million is a big jump there, but that is on trend.
That's a big number.
Right? All right. I went really high.
I was trying to think, do they even have 250 million?
Dude, I think my MLS has 250 million.
I want to go big with the predictions.
Yeah.
You think your MLS is 250 million?
I'm exaggerating. Listen, I love the prediction because I think it's right. I think that all these MLSs, whether it's 250 million, I think it's going to be a vastly higher amount. Probably if you were to say, I'll bet it's as much as they've invested in the last 3 years combined, they would invest this year, because every MLS is looking at technology as being one of what they have to build as a core strength. It's something that they do, not that they just become a conduit for other vendors, but that they actually develop something on their own. And I think they've got the money. I joke about my MLS having $250 million, but I just know that every time I go to an MLS, I'm like, man, their offices are so much nicer than my offices. Like every time they have like waterfalls and stuff. Like, where does this all come from? So, and I know most of them, they just, because they're not, most of them aren't for profit. So they just keep the money. They just keep cycling it out. I don't know what they do with it, but this is something I think the money, I think he's right. I think the money will be invested.
I think it's a great prediction.
I'm actually going to take the off. It's a great prediction, and I like it. I'm just saying, Joe, you just said why that's unlikely to happen, right? Which is, you're a broker. You go every time you go to the MLS's office, you're like, wow, these offices are way nicer than mine. I think next year, man, brokers are going to be fucking staring at like bankruptcy in the face, right? I mean, the latest projections are volumes are going to be down 30%. I think a lot of brokers are going to be staring at, we're going to go bankrupt. We're actually have to go out of business. And I think a lot of them are going to look at their MLSs with this deep pockets, with the real nice offices and the nice lunches, and all these staffers are going to be like, we need you guys to give us money. I actually think in that environment for an MLS to be like, hey, we just wrote a check for $40 million into this tech company. That's dangerous. Like that's how you lose your job as an MLS CEO when your broker participants go, you're doing what while we are starving? Like, I don't know. Maybe. Like, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I don't know that the idea that that we go to an MLS and say, "Hey, we need money from you," that the MLSs would give us money is to me, that's such an unthinkable proposition that I'm looking at Craig Fisher and yeah, that's like I don't even know how that would work. That's like me going to my kids,
what they would
my
they're
9-year-old
not going to
and
write
asking them
checks.
for money.
No,
Like they don't.
this has happened. What they'll do is they'll be like, okay, we're going to waive fees for this year.
Sure. I mean that could be a challenge, but
It'll be
here's
things
the
like
thing.
that.
I think with the way it happens is that the MLSs frame it, and Fish should probably speak to it because it's his prediction. But my guess is that the MLSs would go to the broker and say, "Listen, we're trying to stave off these insurgents, and one of the ways we're going to do that is we're going to build this tool or buy this tool that's going to help you be competitive and help you save money and take something off your plate." I think the whole brokers don't want the MLS level the playing field is a battle that has been lost. That was lost 15 years ago. That brokers need the MLS to have a certain base level of technology that they use because there's just too much for brokers to be able to handle on their own. They need that. So I don't think that there's that as much reaction. I think that most brokers would be, if it was being spent wisely and invested wisely, and if they trust their MLS, I don't think there would be that much negative. I mean, there would be blowback, but I think it would be doable. I think it's certainly something that I could see happening. There's certainly MLSs that have been doing it, just not necessarily at the scale that Fish is projecting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably wise of them. You see the leading MLSs taking, this sort of positioning this past year in little buckets, and so I think they'll be doing them in larger waves, and maybe the people who aren't involved this time around will want to get involved. So I think all of that's possible, and they have to invest. I mean, what else are you going to do? I mean, this is a pivotal moment at a market shift to, elevate what these services offer, especially at times when they're being defended in giant lawsuits, the business model to its very core essence. And so I also feel that, and, maybe they won't write all the checks, but I think that's also what would be pulling you forward is you certainly would think you need to take a slightly different direction moving into this decade. It doesn't have to be drastic, but I think some of the blueprints are there, and some of the big MLSs have already, started doing it. So 250 might be a lot, but I want them to shoot high.
All right, love it. Cool. All right, Joe, what's your prediction for 2023?
Hold on, I had to get back.
Lost Joe.
Yeah, I lost me for a second. I'm dealing with stuff in my environment right now that's not airport related, but is otherwise related. No, I'm back. My prediction, actually, I think that I was gonna. Here was my prediction that I was going to have coming in, which is that I think the market's going to be very boring next year. Is that we've had 3 years of just exciting markets. 2020 was crazy. 2020 was pandemic shutdown, post-pandemic, just tidal wave, crazy, just a bizarre market. 2021 was one of the hottest markets in history. And then 2022 was Robertson's, his big thing. The interest rates he's clearly right. That's the story that precipitated everything else. Interest rates doubling in the course of like a 5-month period put such a chill on the market, and that caused. We really had just a crazy market in 2022 as well. I think that what we'll see in 23 is a relatively calm, flat market. I think that we won't have the excitement we've had over the last few years, but I'm gonna reframe it a little bit because just in the course of the half hour we've been on this call, you guys seem very bearish on the housing market, much more bearish than I am, and maybe that's because I'm having motivated reasoning that as a broker I don't want the market to collapse completely, but we haven't had, at least in my markets in the Northeast, I mean, my company's in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and I follow what's going on in the other Northeast markets. We haven't had nearly, it's been down this year, but it's like at 2019, 2018 sales levels. And like, I think my guess is next year will be at like 17 sales. It'll be down from this year, but it won't be 2009. It won't be 2008. It's going to be more like 2015 or 2016, which was a very unremarkable market from the brokerage perspective. It was like up a little bit, down a little bit. But if we have sales next year close to 2015 levels, but prices that are right now 30 to 35% higher, and maybe they'll be down a little bit, but they'll still be at least 25 to 30% higher than they were back in 2017. That's not a terrible market for a brokerage industry. The brokerage industry will be fine. I think.
Okay, so give me numbers. How many home sale transactions by the end of 2023?
You got to give me the baseline of what we have in 2022. Where are we right now?
Oh God, 2022. I don't know. 2021, I know was over 6.5 million.
I'll say 8% down for next year in sales transactions from this year.
Down 8%.
Down 8%.
Okay.
And I think prices will be flat, maybe down a point or two on average.
Okay.
But not too much. And I think interest rates are they're gonna flatten out. I don't think interest rates are gonna go up back to where they've been. I think they're gonna stay relatively. I don't think it's gonna create any more interest rate shocks to the market. My hope is that inventory comes back. I mean, our challenge right now is still not enough inventory, at least in the Northeast, that people will say, oh, prices are up and there's an opportunity. The bigger concern I have is, are people going to have golden handcuffs to their home, that they're locked into their home because their rate is so good that they never want to move? That's a concern they're going to have for the next 10 years. But I think the market's going to be fine. I mean, I don't think it's going to be great, but I don't think it's going to be terrible next year. And that may make me an outlier in this four-person conversation, but I don't think it's going to be that bad. That's
what do
my
you think, Fish? What do you think, Fish? You're the other broker on the call. I mean, you're positive with Joe?
Well, I mean, it just depends on, where you sit at the table to develop that context. I think the brokerages that, are working really hard continue, to replace that volume as they grow. And if you can those organizations can come through flat or slightly better as far as volume goes through the year. They've done a tremendous job. And so when I think about brokerage owners and operators, I think the best ones and some lucky ones, will push through quite brilliantly through here.
Yeah, that wasn't my question. I'm saying, do you agree that the market, 8% down in transactions, flat to 1% down in prices?
Yeah, pretty close. I mean, monthlies, right? The last quarter compared to last quarter, you're talking 25, 30%. Some of our markets in reduction in volume, right? That's just month compared to the last month. Told it out over the year. Yeah, I mean,
well, that's seasonality too, right? It's December,
down.
But
yeah.
But compared to the previous, September, October, November, December. So the volumes are down in the last quarter in the markets for sure. The prices just, they're not going to ease too much. It just based on basic, there's not enough supply.
Supply and demand, yeah.
The
what do you think, Greg?
Aren't pressed to sell. So,
yeah. What do you think, Greg? You think we'll see that? Are we being too bearish?
No, I mean, so what is it? A normal market's like between 5 and 5.5 million homes sold per year. I think I saw one prediction. It's going to be 4.5 or 6 for next year. And that's off of, I don't know what 2022 brings. It's got to be close to 5, right? Or something like that.
2022, I should really look it up. I know 2021 was like over 6.5 million or something.
Yeah. We're coming back to earth here, right? So, I mean, and as far as like Joe is saying, it's like, there's this what do they call that, cognitive dissonance, or what? I mean, when you're trying to convince yourself of something because it benefits you. I forget the phrases,
benefits you. Motivated reasoning is what I say. Yeah, motivated reasoning.
Yeah. So I mean, as a vendor, as a vendor, I'm trying to think positive too. I'm just hoping that that we can still sell some software out there to this market, right? So I'm with you on that a little bit, but I mean, my predictions are a little bit. I've got several predictions, but I'm kind of feeling where Joe's coming out with the market stuff, the overall market stuff for sure.
I will just say, projecting an 8% decline in sale transactions is that's a pretty, especially if it's coupled with even a point or two decline in average prices, that's pretty bearish on its own. I'm just not bearish to the point of like the sky is falling on the market, because I look and I say, well, 2020 was like the best year ever. 2020, 2021 was even better. 2022 came down, and I think we're going to be down again next year. But I think that if you're trying to compare it to 2020 or 21, you're going to look terrible. But if you're trying to compare it to like 2017, 18, it's not so bad. And I don't think we're going to see what happened in 2008, because 2008 and 2009, there were exigent circumstances with the adjustable rates that were out of the crazy loan products and all the CDOs and all that stuff. That's not there right now. Everybody who's gotten a loan in the last 8 years has gotten a fixed rate mortgage. They're all sitting on a great mortgage. They're not going to. They've all got equity in the home. They're not walking away. We're not going to have a foreclosure boom out of this, no matter what happens. Everyone's got a job. I mean, everyone's got a job, and they have a home that they have equity in. So, like, it's not going to be 2008. I think it's going to be 2015. Yeah. So, you ask me how many homes are going to sell.
All right.
How many we sold in 2015? That's how many homes we sell. That's my guess. I think it's
so far, according to NAR stats, as of October, because the November stats will come out in about 10 days. No, 5 days. But the latest stats from NAR is 2022 will end with about 4.4 million annualized sales.
Wow. That's
down a lot.
That's down a lot.
That's really low. Those are actually like 2008, 9 type numbers. You know what I mean? That's really low. And what most economists are thinking is going to be down even further from this year. Mm. So I think we might breach 4 million homes sold, which is a fucking disaster. Right? I mean, it's going to be horrible. So we'll see. Look, let's put it this way. As people who are in the real estate industry, I hope you're right, Joe.
You hope I'm right about my 8% decline in units. Yeah.
No, dude. Honest. So this is not my prediction, but I want the Fed to pivot. Right? Like this, I actually think they need to completely reverse course for a whole variety of reasons. I think they will, but it's not my prediction, because that's more the variety of sure to be wrong. So that'll be in my blog. Right?
And just for reference, in 2015, it was 5.2 million homes sold. Right? So this is, yikes.
Yeah, look, if we end this year at 4.5 million, I think 2023 we end that with below 4 million. Because we're going to be in a recession next year, right? It's going to be pretty ugly. And I know what Joe's saying about, everyone has jobs. Yeah, but dude, like core inflation is still up like 7%. The labor force participation rate is the lowest level ever. It's going to be pretty ugly, I think. And no one's going to be buying. Like mortgage rates will be like north of 7, north of 8. I mean, it'll be effing crazy. I just don't see it. But what I know, sure be wrong. Or your money back. Greg Robertson, what's your prediction?
So am I limited to one, or can I just spread it out a bit?
Let's do one. Well, spread it out, but what the hell? We only have like 8, 10 minutes left, unless you want to do a super special 4-hour.
The one that, and you guys can choose which one you want to hammer me on or whatever. I think number one prediction would be NAR membership goes down to like 1.4 million realtors. So if we look at the November numbers next year, it'll be around that. It's about, I think, close to 1.6, maybe higher right now. I think that CoStar's folly into the New York market, City Snap, I think that fails and folds next year. I think that,
that's a bold one.
iBuyer.
CoStar, City Snap folds.
Yeah. I think that, one of the iBuyers, one of these iBuyers is either going to pivot dramatically or maybe the smaller ones just totally fail. Right. Just can't get out of it. They're not as capitalized as much on that. Right. So those are the kind of top ones here I have.
Yeah, the City Snap one, dude. Like, there's no way, right? CoStar is not going to let that happen. They have all the money in the fucking world.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I don't. What's the? I mean, I'm curious as to what's the basis for that, because I don't know. I mean, as you all know, I was involved with CoStar a little bit when I was working for the Broker Public Portal, but I wasn't involved with CitySnap. They launched it while I was there, so I was kind of peripherally aware of it. But I'm curious as to why you would think it would fail within the first year of operation. Is there something
it's
that
not
you
the
think's
first year.
going on there?
This was the first year. This is the next year. That I never hear anything about it. I've been on the site. Street Easy is still by far, the preferred thing. I don't see how they turn the corner on that. Whether they have all the money in the world. I mean, I just don't think he keeps something operated just because of pride. He's not that stupid either, right? It's just, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, New York's a tough market. It's a weird market in there. There's been so many people have tried to create portals in that place, and it just has not worked, right? So, yeah.
I mean, I talked to both of you maybe 7 years ago about this New York thing, I mean, it's been in development since then. We had you remember that year where the acquisition happened, and then Rebney was having all the meetings, and then Department of State, all that stuff. So, I mean, it's been quite a long time. The brand of Street Easy is one of the, I mean, as far as real estate goes, it's Nike level brand affinity in New York City for Street Easy. Anybody who's been in New York City knows that. That's tough to break into. But the only thing I would say is maybe their back ends. But if they build apartments, the back end should be able to facilitate the building level. I don't know. I haven't played around on there enough. So maybe, the technology isn't as good. But really what it comes down to is the advertising hubris of, who answers the phone or answers the contact form probably doesn't help them too much in that respect either.
All right. I think, I just look at it as, look, Bing still exists.
I don't know if I buy. Listen, I don't know. I just think that CoStar has a pretty good track record of building these technologies and launching them, and then putting enough money in them to be successful. I'm in Manhattan right now, and I do see some of their advertising. I have friends within the industry. I have not talked to them about whether it's changing behavior. And I take Greg. If Greg says that he doesn't see it either, I buy into that. But I just don't think that. Listen, it's a bold prediction. I think it's an interesting prediction.
I like it. Don't get me wrong. I like it. Just I'm going to argue with him because that's what Greg and I do.
I just don't know. But I would be surprised if they did that, just simply because, not because of the pride issue, but I think just because I think they give it more time to succeed or fail. They're not going to cut it unless it's the kind of thing where we've seen them make a lot of changes at HomeSnap. Maybe they look at that as being part of the past and they're looking to something in the future and they want to go a different direction. But we'll see. I think they also have partners in that with the real estate boards and stuff like that. I don't know if they'd be able to walk away quite as easily.
Yeah. All right. So let me do my prediction, and then I got a question for this panel here. So since, like I said, I have 7 predictions that are sure to be wrong that I'm working on. Okay. So I try to find one that I think has a reasonable chance of being correct. And I think it's this one. I think Compass will end the year no longer as a public company, one way or the other.
In 2023.
Right? Either they're going to get acquired. Right. By the end of 2023, Compass will not be a publicly traded company because they will either be acquired or they will be bankrupt.
I like how Robertson thought you might have been talking about the end of this year, which has like
I did. I was
left.
like, it's like
5 days left.
There's 2 weeks left. There's 2 weeks left, baby.
End of next year, right? Because I've been hearing for the last few months a lot of folks speculating like home services might buy them, right? Because Warren Buffett's got all the money in the world. You combine Compass, which is number 1 in volume, with home service. That does make some sense. The valuation of Compass has been driven so low, and their investors are probably ready to bail. If Warren Buffett came calling us like, "I'll give you 30 cents on the dollar," there's a chance that they could pick that up pretty easily. As well as just a lot of folks are reporting they're in trouble, cash flows. A lot of their agents unhappy, blah blah blah. Again, I don't know if that's true or wrong. I think it's a mistake to write them off. I think Compass still, no matter how they got there, Like Joe, you mentioned their business model, like fine, but they got there. The point is, they are now the number one brokerage by volume. They have some great agents.
They do.
And I think as long as they maintain their local management, who has the loyalty of those agents, they have a chance. But I think they're going to need something.
I would go further and say I think they have great agents. I think they've got a really good brand. I think they've got good installed base where they are. They're in the right places. There's a lot going for them. I'm not. My point, they got there by having a lot of money, which, it's nice to have a lot of money. But I agree with you. I think it's an interesting prediction. I would say that there's a really good possibility of their acquisition, not necessarily in a negative way, just in a way that, their value, you mentioned about their valuation going down. If you look at their valuation now and you look at it from the perspective of how are real estate companies valued at 100 to 125% of company dollar versus, 3 to 6 times earnings. Like, it'd be tough to value them on earnings, but in terms of their a multiple of their company dollar, my guess is that a multiple of their company dollar would give a valuation of somewhere around $1 billion, which is about where they're getting to.
Yeah.
Which means that
they're 1.15 now.
Which means those guys can go to Warren and say to Warren, I call him Warren, just FYI. They go to Warren and say,
You're
hey,
first
Warren.
name basis with him. I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because you're Joe Rand. Of course you are.
They go to Warren and they say, this company, under our valuation model that we use to buy all these other companies, Compass now fits in that alignment, which they didn't a year ago. So I think there's an opportunity there. And, I actually think that whether it would be home services or whether it would be possibly anywhere or some venture capital, whatever, I do think that Compass would do very well as one of the brands aligned with either the home services brands or some of the. I think home services might be the better fit just because they have a lot of independent companies, formerly independents that are under their stable. And there's a lot of really good companies there. Houlihan Lawrence, who we compete with, is there.
So there's a secondary prediction based on what you just said that I can make. This is not going to come true, but this would be the kind of thing that appears on my blog as sure to be wrong. But it does make sense if Howard Hanna were to buy Compass and then put Joe Rand in as CEO of Compass.
Yeah, okay.
Because that would actually save that company. I'm just saying, the best-selling author, Joe Rand, incredible motivator. If he were the CEO of Compass, I'm just saying, Robert's made his money. He could retire and go into politics. That would be my prediction. That
in the words of Greg Robertson, the moral words of Greg Robertson.
You somehow rope in the BPP on this. Gold mine.
Oh,
that's what I'm saying. Gold
no,
mine.
that's what my point was that in the immortal words of Greg Robertson, you must be smoking something to think that's going to happen, at least in my involvement. As whether Howard Hanna would be involved, I have no idea, and if I did, I wouldn't be able to comment on it. But we haven't let Fish get in. Fish, you got to get in to talk about
That's
this.
right, Fish.
Interesting prediction because it would really signify the last new enterprise level brokerage to sort of do the thing that they all do.
Yeah.
And it's not good or bad. It means that, they're probably getting a lot better at this business, but it's certainly an unremarkable finish compared to, thoughts you might have had 5 to 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Greg, Fish, is there any chance Western Maine could be a bidder for Compass? I mean, how much cash do you guys have? I'm just wondering. I know you're very successful. Compass is only $1 billion, Joe. I'm just saying. Like, break some news. Western Maine is going to bid for Compass.
You know what? I will give us. We did open a coffee shop yesterday, so if that gives you any perspective,
you got to scale it up.
That's right.
Which,
better margins in coffee. That's for damn sure.
Is amazing. Hey, some smart entrepreneurs there that did that.
Hey, listen.
So,
if you look at Fish's pitch deck for buying for this enterprise that he has with the coffee shop, on the 37th slide, there's something there about acquiring Compass. So don't be surprised. It's in there. It's part of the long-term pivoting transition plan. It could come up. It could happen.
It's not even me. It's not even my thing.
It's not the slide. Okay.
All right, so I know we're running out. Dude, seriously, next year we got to do 4-hour Joe Rogan style because we could just go on and on. But since we are running out of time, I did have a question for the panel. It's based on something Greg and I talked about a couple of episodes ago. So CoStar came out in its earnings call. It said, we raised $250 million, like just a war chest, just to have it. And Andy Florence said, we are looking for a significant, like game-changing acquisition in residential real estate. He made that very clear. All right. So Greg and I talked about who could they acquire? What is this game-changing acquisition that CoStar could do? So I think, Greg, I can't remember which ones I think it was like Black Knight or
I
something
predicted,
else. Realtor.com.
No, I had predicted that because they were talking about doing all this content, for agents, that they were going to buy Matterport, which had just bought VHT Studios, which had a whole photography network, right? And their valuation was pretty low because of how compressed everything is. And what was interesting that happened was Zillow went and bought a photographer's network. I forget, was it VRX or something like
VRX,
something like that. Yeah. So it's like I thought somebody was listening to this podcast, but I guess Andy didn't get the message, but Rich Barton did, and went and bought that. So I thought it was Matterport. Yeah.
Okay. Let's turn that over to Fish. What is a game-changing acquisition Andy Florence does next year?
So I'll go somewhere I don't think any of you will go, and I'll say they get into the mortgage space with the power buyer, maybe Homeward, something like this, and they see that the opportunity in front of everybody is to perhaps actually make this mortgage process easier, more seamless, and they are able to roll that out at a full national scale without complexity, with great marketing and awareness of those products, and they enter in a slightly different path than maybe they were going to, and they could probably do it without overpaying, and they could probably scale that up into something interesting. So I'm going to go with they get into the power buyer, cash offer, mortgage business.
Okay. Not in a million years, but okay.
The only issue I would have with that prediction is that, I mean, my interaction over the last 2 years that I had with CoStar, they were willing to forswear ever getting involved in mortgage banking as a condition of their proposed deal with BPP. That was public; everybody knew that. That's nothing private about that. That would strike me as being, unless they were really pivoting to a completely new model.
Well, they're out of that agreement, right?
They're out of that agreement, but my point is they were willing to do it, which means that it was not on the drawing board. Like they were saying, hey, listen, we'll never become a mortgage company because we don't want to do that. I actually think that, everything they've done has been about trying to make money by getting agents to pay for services to market properties to end users. Like that's their model in multifamily. That's their model, and that's what they're trying to do in residential. So I think that makes more sense.
Hold on, Joe. Yeah. Let me just agree with you. I think CoStar, if you look at their history, they've been remarkably disciplined about the business that they do and don't get into. They get into data businesses. They get into portal businesses. They don't really stray out of that too much. Like even HomeSnap is really kind of a portal data business as opposed to being like an agent productivity tool business or, that's why I don't think they get into something so completely far outside of their field. But go ahead, Joe.
But I think, for example, Greg Robertson's suggestion that they would buy a company that would help them create content, that would help them market homes.com to agents, I think makes a lot of sense. Right. I don't know if it's the game changer because I think it just levers what's already a strength of theirs as opposed to getting them something new. I think that, you want to say what would be a game-changing acquisition from their perspective would be something that actually does what everyone suspected they would try to do, and they made every effort, it seemed to me, not to do, which would be to buy somebody that puts them in a position to really take on the MLSs. I don't think they'll do it, but if they were to be a game-changing...
Who would that be?
Well, go buy Open Door. Open Door is now... They're a much bigger company than Open Door. They could acquire Open Door and take that marketplace idea, and they already have experience managing marketplaces like that in multifamily and commercial. Like that's a synergy that to some extent makes some sense. I don't know if that would actually happen, but I think that would be a game changer if they were to go by open
It's a
door.
game
That's a game
changer,
changer
sure.
because they don't want to buy open door because they don't want to do iBuying. They don't want it for that purpose, but they might want it for the purpose of connecting buyers and sellers, and then being able to put agents at the center of that to make money from the agents to market themselves to those buyers and sellers. That's something I can see them doing.
I like Greg's. I mean, I think I said Black Knight, when we were talking about it last. But if we were talking game changing, like really like holy shit, game changing, to me, there's only one.
Okay.
Right? Which is that they buy Zillow.
Buy Zillow, yeah. So that's the only thing I can think of you were going to say, yeah.
Right? Because I was thinking about, it's like, oh, that seems ridiculous. Like, they hate each other. Zillow's doing everything to fend off, to competing against CoStar. They're the dominant big dog, blah, blah. I'm like, wasn't that long ago that Zillow and Trulia were at each other's throats? Talk about competition, talk about rivalry. And then you wake up one day, it's like, Zillow's acquiring Trulia, right? And like, at the end of the day, it's just business. I could easily see, with Zillow's valuation being driven so low, Andy just being like, look, we're all business people. There's a price. We'll give you $15 billion for Zillow. Like double. I think a lot of Zillow shareholders would be like, we out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we out. So that would be the big game-changing, like, holy crap thing. And it's right in their, sort of wheelhouse.
Yep.
And,
Yeah, but it goes everything
Right,
against
so-
their whole notion of not being a broker, of your listing your lead philosophy. This just means they just do.
But
an
if they
about
acquire
face.
it,
they
no,
shut off
what
all
I'm saying, they
revenue for
acquire
it.
Zillow. Correct. They just dump Premier Agent and go right to
Jeez.
real estate.
Well, he has. He did that with Homes.com. He just abandoned
Right.
the whole revenue model there, right? Just
Right.
crazy. But
Right.
yeah, I don't know. That's
That makes sense.
that's one way of changing the model.
bold.
How many paying
Say that again?
customers do you think are out there, right? How many paying customers do you think are out there? Because you look at, Zillow, for instance, and you have to wonder, do they have the same tens of thousands of paying customers anymore? Who's really cutting these checks? Is there enough of them to pay
for sure. Oh, for sure.
these ads? You think so?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. Yeah.
Curious.
Because it's the same thing as commercial real estate, right? A lot of times, what I think people miss is, like, you look at commercial. It's not like commercial agents are paying CoStar and buying these ads because they really think it's going to help sell their fucking warehouse building. They're paying for and buying these ads so that when they go and talk to the landlord or talk to the owner, say, hey, if you give me this listing, if you give me this assignment, I'm going to promote your... it's one of those things.
Well, that goes
right?
back. That's literally what real estate sales has always been about on the listing side.
Yeah.
Has been, I'm going to put your home in the newspaper, which I will tell you right now is not going to have anything to do with selling your home. But it's going back 20 years. We're going to put a big glossy ad on Sunday about your home in the newspaper,
it's Homes.
which is not going to sell your home, but it's going to make you feel good.
But it's Homes.com. Everybody wants their stuff on Zillow. It's not. It's not going to be.
I agree. So that's what I'm saying. So if CoStar were to acquire Zillow, right, and then be like, we're going to convert Zillow over to this model, I'm just answering Fisher's question, right? Which is, I think a lot of agents will be like, yeah, sure, I'll write you a check for $5,000 a month because I need the ability to go to my sellers and be like, hey, I'm going to promote the hell out of your home and blah, blah, blah. I think that's how it'll work. Sure, you lose money for a little bit, but Andy's used to that. And the other interesting thing I was thinking about this was, I don't see an FTC problem with that deal, right? Like, there's FTC review when Zillow acquires Showing Time or something like that. I'm like, CoStar is not a presence in residential real estate.
Yeah,
right? So for CoStar to acquire Zillow,
Apartments.com, they could say now we're going to corner the market. It's not nothing, Rob, right?
I guess it's not nothing, but it just feels like it would survive FTC review only because even Zillow, when they come out and say, look, with all of our reach and all of our stuff, I think, what did they say? Rich Bart was like, we only have like 6% of the transactions or sales or something. Like, this is part of his whole Housing Super App business plan, right? It's like, we're going to double our share of the market. It's like, even Zillow is still a very, very small part of the market. I think there's a decent chance that survives review. That's my game changer.
I will say the way you see yourself getting there is the fact that CoStar came into residential with an acquisition of HomeSnap for a couple $100 million. Then it acquired Homes.com 6 months later for, I think, actually less money. So it's only in for from a. I mean, it's a lot of money, $500 million. Okay, it's $500,000, $500 million. That's a lot of money to me and you, but not necessarily to CoStar. So they're in, and they're kind of feeling their way around. They try to do the deal with BPP, that doesn't work out, and they say, well, we could spend the next 5 years trying to beat Zillow and spend this amount of money to do it, or we could just go say, Zillow now it's valued at half it was, maybe. Yeah. That
less
was
than half.
When they
it's
bought,
like $7 billion.
When CoStar bought HomeSnap, Zillow was probably 2 or 3 times its share price. So it may now be a viable possibility where it wasn't a viable possibility a couple of years ago. And they might say, you know what, we could buy it, we could put it under our model, like Greg said, put it under our model and make it run and not have to compete with number one, just go right into being number one. It kind of goes against what they did in apartments, because apartments, they didn't go buy the number one company, they built the number one company, but I could see them saying, let's take a shortcut this time.
I could see it.
Sure,
and who knows, maybe they joint venture that fucking thing, because we know that Andy Florence has this great regard for REA Group, right, out of Australia. Dude, if Rupert Murdoch and Andy Florence said, let's pull money together, go buy Zillow. I mean, shit, Zillow's now like 8.4 billion. They were at one point like 35 billion. Do you know what I'm saying? 8.4 is very doable for combined Fox and CoStar, right?
Jeez. Yeah.
And then if I'm Rupert, I just spin off Realtor.com. It's like, hey, NAR, here you go. You can have it back. Right? Like, we don't give a shit. We'll dump at Realtor.com.
Redirect it.
Well, no, if they have control of that, they just switch that. They just now switch that model, right? I mean, boom.
The problem with switching that model is that Realtor.com, there's all these licenses because you don't control the brand, right? NAR controls that brand. There are all these terms, all these license things. So you just dump it, just like get rid of it, spin it off, whatever, sell it off to Redfin. Who cares? Just sell it off, right? Spin it off in its own thing, and then go in and buy Zillow with CoStar. That is a game changing. Heard it here first, people.
Wow, that happens, man. You got good tape. If that happens 6 months from now, you got good tape.
Yeah.
To lay it out.
Yeah, we'll have to go back to this. I'm going big no on it. I think those Zillow folks have bigger plans than to just cash that check. But hey, I don't run a public company, so I'm sure if that check shows up, it's probably pretty hard to come up with reasons for a no. But I don't know that it's their destiny per se.
Who knows? That's in the class of prediction sure to be wrong or your money back, but that won't be on my blog. So, all right, listen, this has been fun, but Greg, you got to get home. Seriously, guys, if this, I enjoyed this. Maybe next year, let's actually think about doing this long, like real long.
Oh, boy.
Like Joe
We'll
Rogan
see who was right and wrong,
and then we
on
could
this,
explore
right?
every prediction.
Yeah,
absolutely. We got to
run
see.
this back.
So
you got to see what happened. Yeah, absolutely, next year.
Yeah, because I'm the only guy, as far as I know, who does grading. The predictions. My lifetime batting average is 374.
It's not bad.
Just saying.
That's really not bad.
It's not bad.
You consider you make predictions that are not obvious. So yeah, the fact that you hit 1 out of 3 is pretty
intentionally
good.
meant to be wrong.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But last couple of years I've been like 170. So we'll see.
Well, if I'm wrong on my prediction, I'm not going to be able to afford internet service next year. So you have to. I'll be in a library. I'll be in the public library. Hey, keep quiet down over there.
Since I think this is the last one before Christmas, I do want to wish all of you a very Merry Christmas. I would love to wish all of our listeners a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, because without y'all, we wouldn't bother doing this. So I do want to say thank you, and I guess thanks to sponsors who have been supporting us on this crazy little thing of ours. Greg, any thoughts? Any Christmas holiday words from you, sir?
Absolutely. Happy holidays. I mean, if I think about Rent Spree, I think about all the other sponsors we've had this year, Ernest and, all the guys that have helped us. That's great. And just for everybody listening, I really appreciate it. It's really great when I go to these conferences of people telling me they were listening to it on the way, on the flight over or in their cars or something. So we appreciate the support. And thank you guys, Joe and Greg. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Greg. It was a pleasure. And we will. I'm sure I'll see you
Happy
all of you guys
holidays.
next year sometime. You know?
Yep.
See you next year.
Bye bye,
All
everybody.
right. All right. Thanks, everyone.